All right, let's talk about where the heart is at in your body and then what creates the cavity that it sits in. So we know that our heart is in the thoracic cavity and it's medial to both lungs. But if we zoom in even closer, we can see that the heart and the lungs are in their own separate cavities. So not only is it in the thoracic cavity, but if we divide that thorax, we can have a lung cavity, and then the heart or the middle cavity. The heart and the middle cavities are called the mediastinum. So your heart is in there, the great vessels, the trachea, the esophagus, the thymus gland, those are all part of the mediastinum. Then within that mediastinum, we know that the heart creates the pericardial cavity. Pericardial, meaning around the heart. So to create that pericardial cavity, we need to have some structure to separate the heart from the other organs in the thoracic cavity. So let's see what those structures are. To create the pericardial cavity, we first start with this pericardial sac. And it surrounds the entire heart. You can see it up here, this thick white layer. This is your fibrous pericardium. And if you've ever seen open heart surgery or viewed a cadaver heart, this fibrous pericardium really does enclose the entire heart to keep it separate from those lungs and other organs in the thorax. Okay. That is what's going to create the cavity. Now we have to look at the serous membranes that both line the cavity and that cover the organ. So lining the cavity is this layer here. Okay. On our heart, it's this outer line just deep to the fibrous pericardium, and it is the parietal pericardium. It's lining the cavity that was created by the fibrous pericardium. We then appreciate that there's a space, that's the pericardial space filled with pericardial fluid. And then we get to the lining or the covering of the heart itself. So we had parietal pericardium, then a space, and now the layer that is directly on the surface of the heart, and that's the visceral pericardium, also known as the epicardium. I tend to use visceral pericardium because that's the serous membrane name. Okay, so visceral pericardium. And all of those layers are outside of the heart. So creating again the sac is that fibrous pericardium. Lining that fibrous pericardium is the parietal pericardium. The space for pericardial fluid, and then this visceral pericardium on the surface of the heart. Now we're to the organ itself. We look at the tissue of the organ next, and we see that we're at the muscle layer. Right? Over here on this smaller picture, we had our visceral pericardium. And then if we move into the muscle layer, that's the myocardium. Good old cardiac muscle. And we can't stop there. We go all the way inside. The heart is hollow. And so we have this inner layer, inner lining, and that layer, meaning on the inside, is endocardium. So you see there's many layers here before you get to the blood that's being pumped through the heart. You have to get through the cavity, you have to get through the serous membranes, you have to get through the organ wall, and then you finally end up at the blood within each of the 4 chambers. Give this a try on your picture and practice labeling. You probably have more colors than I do, so you can differentiate between these. Practice putting them in sequence from superficial to deep and then deep to superficial.